So oh, you caught me with my pants down. Oh, it's too early. Here we go. Get your coffee. It's gonna be a hot one today. Woo! I'm glad we're not on the air yet.
Okay, good morning, Timothy, and good morning to everybody watching Japanese Politics One-on-One, where we talk about the latest events in Japanese politics, the events that shape the business environment in Japan, but also your life here. Because there are a lot of changes and a lot of policies that impact that life, regardless of whether you are Japanese or a foreigner in Japan. So, thank you very much for joining us. And, Timothy, good morning to you as well.
Good morning, Maya. How are you doing? I am back on the good ship Grimm's. I am still underground in the main cabin. It's a nice day outside. Not as nice as yesterday. Yesterday, completely blue skies. Last night, the stars were just glorious. Not a cloud in the sky, and it was just a really nice weekend. So today, our 249th episode. I'll try and get through the briefing points as quickly as possible, and then turn it over to you for the Q&A, Maya.
Thank you very much for that, Timothy. We already have questions that are coming in, and it is great to have them. To everybody watching us, thank you for doing this. Share your thoughts, questions, comments with us on the platform where you're watching us, and then I will go through them and feed them to Timothy once he finishes the briefing. Also, please remember to let us know that you have been here. Hit like, subscribe, follow, or share these briefings even with your friends and family who you think might benefit from the information we talk about, because politics is not as boring as some people think. And if you have been with us for a while, you already know that. There is a newsletter that is sent out. The synopsis of these briefings is sent out every week, maybe a couple of days after the briefing is over. And if you haven't subscribed yet, let us know. We'll do that for you. Or you can also do that by going to Substack and Langley Square's account and hit subscribe there. Timothy, now it's over to you with the
Great.
details, I believe.
Thank you very much, Maya. Reporting from the home port of Katsuyama on the inside Tokyo Bay lip of Chiba Coast. So it's just a small fishing port where I'm berthed. Reporting to you the 249th episode. Thank you very much for those of you who have been with us the whole time, and for the new members who are joining us. Thank you very much. If you have questions that come up, and I know a lot of people, they're not watching this live because who wants to wake up at 8:20 to listen to politics? I mean, some people do, but probably later. But like Maya said, she is getting questions even before the briefing starts. We try and address those. I don't have all the answers. I'm not the smartest guy on Japanese politics, but the purpose of this show is just to bring you up to speed, let you know what's going on, tell you what's important, what you need to watch, and what it all means in the grand scheme of things. We do this once a week, so it's not a full briefing where you sit down and you have lunch and listen to me talk for a whole hour. I'll try and get through the briefing, bring you up to speed in 30 minutes or so, and then roll into the Q&A. So if you've got those, please feed them to Maya. Today I'm going to talk about Ms. Takaichi. She's in her 4th week as Prime Minister, first female Prime Minister in Japanese post-war history. And she has been on the hot seat. 2 weeks ago, she was all over the international travel. She was in Malaysia. She came here. She hosted President Trump for 3 days, 3 full days. It was a full state visit. And then she was off to South Korea for APEC meeting. And that was a big deal. And she came back, and then this last week, she's been dealing internally. So she did have some foreign visitors. The schedule was kept low, but she was in the diet quite a bit, and she's launching a lot of things too. I'm going to talk about the dynamics inside Japanese politics that kind of minimize the smaller parties and somewhat enhance the larger existing parties. There's a promise that the Prime Minister made to the Ishin no Kai to have them join, not in a coalition, but in a loose alliance, so that they can pass some legislation. We're only 4 weeks into this. It's already fraying at the edges. There were some drop dead commitments that she made. If I don't do it by the end of the diet session, then I've broken my promise to you. And Ishin has basically said, not clearly, but basically said, if you can't fulfill on these promises, then we're going over to the opposition. We're going to file a no confidence motion. So it looks like today that that's not going to happen. The reduction of 50 seats in the diet is not going to happen. It doesn't look like it's possible. And so there's a lot of other things that are going on there that I'd like to talk about. Japanese politics is nothing without its every once in a while scandal, and we've got a couple of things that are kind of emerging from the muck. They're not quite flowers. They're kind of growing up. They'll probably be nipped. I'm not sure, but I want to talk to you about 3 or 4 of those that could potentially be a problem for the prime minister. But Japanese politics is always about that, especially when there's a change in government like we're going through right now. And then I'd like to talk about what's going on geopolitically here in our region, what's going on with North Korea, what's going on with China. And there's a lot going on there, the Philippines, and then in the Northern Territories. And I'd also like to bring you up to speed on where we are with the yen-dollar exchange, what that means to the economy, where we are with inflation, and how that is going to roll into perhaps passing the stimulus budget. That is one of the things that the prime minister needs to do within the next, today is what, the 16th? The diet ends on the 17th of next month. So we're exactly 30 days away from that. And there's a lot on the schedule. I'd like to bring you up to speed on that and open it up to Q&A. So Maya, what should we do? Should I get right into it, or have you already briefed everybody?
I already did, but I'm sure that you can add a lot of things there too, because you are the star of this show. So thank you very much for for that. And
Okay.
yes,
All
let's
right.
go straight into the details.
Great. Let me get right into it then.
Yes.
So the diplomatic schedule and the public schedule of the prime minister has been really on fire. We have been able to get a glimpse of the prime minister in action, and she hasn't disappointed. I think she's really a cut above previous prime ministers. In her first 3 weeks, it was she was getting comfortable with becoming prime minister, and then she had the trip to Malaysia. Immediately, President Trump was, right on the doorstep for 3 days, and then she had to go to South Korea. And then she started the week earlier, about 10 days ago, being confronted by the diet. So there was a series of meetings inside the lower house, and then also replicated in the upper house, where she is quizzed by leaders of the various political parties. So depending on how big they are, gives them the amount of time that they have to question her. So it was a real opportunity for people to come out and scratch and claw and say, what are you going to do about this? And you're a right winger and you hate foreigners, right? And what are you going to do about saving the economy? And you've made all these pronouncements about spending for defense. And what about the constitutional revision? So she has been quizzed on that, and we've watched it very carefully. And then later, this last week, it rolled over into the upper house and into the budget committee. So she had another series of hot seat questions where she and the cabinet are sitting and being quizzed by members of the parliament. So there was a lot to be revealed there. But as that goes on, and as busy as that is, because she has to be briefed, she has to be told how she's supposed to answer. She's got notes to read on, and as a consequence of this, Boonchun is on fire trying to, find weaknesses and cracks in the facade, because that sells magazines. And there has been some things there, some of the scandals that I'd like to get into a little bit earlier, and also some of the pronouncements that the prime minister made that people just love to jump on. And she says that she doesn't sleep very much. She doesn't need much sleep. She sleeps 2 to 4 hours. And then they published a picture of her kind of looking down, and not a very flattering photograph of her, and talking about her vampire-ish persona. and sleeping only 2 hours. Anyway, it's politics as usual. It's a honeymoon time, but it's also a tough time. People want to distinguish themselves by throwing rocks and criticism and that sort of thing. But it's only the fourth week that we're moving into the fifth week now. So at the same time that she was in the hot seat in the parliament and in the budget committee, she also has the stimulus to consider. She has these 10 promises that she made to Ishin. Some of them are drop dead this diet session. So the diet session is going to end on the 17th. And she is essentially committed to Ishin no Kai, that she would make best efforts on achieving these things. And some of them are really, really important. And some of them are, if you don't pass them now, as long as you commit to doing it in the next diet session, maybe we'll give you a pass. But she does need Ishin at this particular point in time. But at the same time, she chaired the Council on Economic and Fiscal Policy. She launched the Japan Growth Strategy Headquarters, which is it's a compilation of 17 strategic sectors that she has decided to put a lot of emphasis on. And that includes semiconductors, shipbuilding, quantum, fusion, cybersecurity, propulsion systems, aerospace, agritech, GX, all those kinds of things compiled into this Japan Growth Strategy Headquarters, which she opened up with some fanfare. So among her her diet colleagues as well, the defense minister, Koizumi, was in the Philippines. They had it wasn't quite a 2+2. It was more than that. It included some of the administrative officials too for a Southeast Asia meet. But it also included not just the United States, South Korea, but also China. And the Chinese defense minister was also there. So they had a little bit of a tit-a-tat there. And Koizumi was also able to meet with him and exchange pleasantries and say, the peace in the Taiwan Strait is essential for regional stability, like duh. But that was the comment that he emphasized there. And just the ongoing diplomacy and the shuttle diplomacy that's really launched since the prime minister has been selected, with METI, with MOFA, going back and forth with ASEAN and Asia and the Pacific Island countries. And so that's one of the reasons why, well, in connection with that, there was a state visit from Fiji. So if you were in the Diet Complex at all anytime this week, the flags of Fiji flew for a long time, maybe 3 or 4 days. It was a long delegation. But coming up, there's the East Asia Summit in Laos later this month. There's the G20 in South Africa, and then early preparation for the 2026 Pacific Island Summit. So there's a lot going on geopolitically there. I think. Sorry, I thought I might be running out of power here, Maya. So
all right. Yes.
I
Okay.
think I'm
Thank
good.
you for noticing that. Okay. Great.
Yes.
Yes.
So with regard to the battles that are going on in the Diet, there are 10 days of fire that she had to go through. We're past that stage now. We're moving into another phase. But over the last maybe 10 days since I last reported to you, Miss Takaichi has been able to reveal something of a Sanae style. She's somewhat informal in answering questions from her colleagues in the Diet. She's sometimes funny and humorous, and she answers in a free-form style. So typically, if you remember many past prime ministers, when they were quizzed, they would come up to the podium with a sheet of paper. They would look down and they would read from the sheet of paper the document that was given to them 20 minutes earlier that they've already briefed, obviously, but they'd read it from the podium. And that's not what she did. And that's quite refreshing. And you notice that about certain leaders like Donald Trump. He doesn't speak from notes. He speaks extemporaneously, and he throws a lot in there. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's inaccurate, but it's endearing for people who are listening. You're not reading a script. And so I think it's a style that she is exposing to us. And I think, it's part of this this change of government that we're experiencing. The biggest shock we had, she didn't blurt it out, but she did say that if China uses force around Taiwan, that equals an existential threat for Japan. And that made things really blow up. There's a lot that came out as a consequence of that. But in the budget committee meeting, the leader of the Sanseito, that's the small party that really exploded in the upper house election, you will remember. Everybody was talking about them. They're anti-foreigner and they're really growing. And so the LDP needs to expand their distaste for foreigners to kind of bring that initiative that Sanseito rode on into the LDP. So we've been going through a little bit of that phase, but in the questioning with the prime minister here, he was a little bit, what would you say, kind of critical of the prime minister about her not going, you're following the right wing philosophy, but you're not going far enough. It's kind of a debate on immigration that he was trying to trigger. But she also announced there in that questioning that zero illegal residence plan. And she's expecting a roadmap by January. So zero illegal residents. So I think they already have zero illegal residents. I mean, even if you're looking for asylum or you've overstayed your visa here, the Japanese are very efficient, very effective about getting you out. There are no rubber dinghies that wash up on the shore, bringing in illegal immigrants. She was also quizzed by the Japan Communist Party leader, Ms. Koike, and she was quizzed. You should you seem to be doing a relatively good job, but you should bring down the consumption tax, and you should make the food, at least remove the consumption tax, which is at 8% for foodstuffs, make that zero and give people a break. So the Communist Party is representing a certain constituency. The LDP represents a different constituency, obviously, but that revenue source of consumption tax on food items is about 5 trillion revenue. And it's difficult to just kind of toss that away, especially in the particular economic situation that Japan is in right now. So Koike instead said, if we raise corporate taxes, then the Japanese companies will leave Japan. We can't tax corporations more. So we're between a rock and a hard place. We need to come up with some other way. We do need to reduce the cost on foods for people. The yen-dollar rate is also impacting imports. So it's the companies that are dedicated to export that are making book. It's the people who live here who have to pay for daily necessities that are getting a little bit hammered. So she has to come up with a economic stimulus package, which is, she's got 30 days left to do that. There have been a lot of discussions about that. The supplemental budget right now under consideration, Maya, is 17 trillion yen. That's what they're thinking about. That is one of the largest ever outside the pandemic response. This is comparable to the annual, almost 2 times the annual defense budget. So that's huge. It's almost, I think it might even exceed the Abenomics supplemental budget that was cost. But the key pillars are cost of living relief for fuel and food subsidies, for electricity support, for local government aid, and the tax charges for higher income tax exemption. So those people, the minimum wage, anything earned below that is tax-free. She wants to raise that number up so more people fall into that tax-free category. It's a tax-free exemption. Possibly she's considering zero tax on food and a gas tax rollback. And for defense, you'll remember, I don't know if you remember, if you're following it that carefully, but she did say to President Trump in their meetings, we have a 5-year plan to devote 2% of GDP to defense. It was 1%. We're on a 5-year plan. We're in year number 4. I'm going to accelerate number 5. I'm going to collapse that into this year, and we're going to spend more to reach that 2% level, not in 5 years, but in 4 years. So that's another thing that is going to eat up some of the money that the Japanese economy is just not generating. And then she also announced a focus on industrial strategy, on AI, on chips, shipbuilding in particular, aerospace and quantum, cybersecurity. These issues are not old issues. They're issues that have been talked about many times before, and we all know what they are. Excuse me. Just want to make sure I'm not going to run out of battery. So these are the kind of policy pronouncements that she's pushed forward. So they're pronouncements. It's not the policy yet. We have to wait. Gosh, I guess maybe within the next 30 days we're going to find a little bit more about policy crafting, but that usually takes time. So it's first the pronouncements, then it's putting the machinery together. But her opening that new office and making these policy pronouncements to kind of mollify some of her opposition colleagues is a step in a very positive direction. Also, the demand from Ishin, this is another big news item, that Ishin said, look, let's take the lower house and let's reduce it by 10%. And if you agree to push that forward before this diet ends, then we'll join you. We have 9 other issues as well, but we want that commitment from you. And the prime minister said, yes, if I become prime minister, that's what I will do. And once prime minister, you will vote with me and the LDP so that we can pass these bills into law during the time period that we have. So Ishin said, okay, we'll do that, but you have to perform first. And first out of the block is 10% reduction. That's about 50 seats within the parliament. So that's a pretty big deal. The analysis is that if they reduce 50 members from the proportional representation, those are kind of the, I guess you could say, the weakest politicians are in this proportional representation. It sounds pejorative, weakest, but I think it's somewhat accurate. So many people who are running for the parliament because they published a book or vote for me because this is my name, they can also ride on the proportional period. And if they don't win here, they might win on the proportional, not because of their fame, but just because the number on the list where their name is and the popularity of the party. So these are kind of called zombie diet members because they lost here where their fame and their notoriety and their reputation should have carried them through. They didn't. They lost to some other candidate, an opposition candidate. But since they, and this is mostly for the LDP, since they are LDP members, they were able to get on the list. So once again, I'm getting into the weeds. But what this means is that they're only going to reduce the 50 members from the proportional representation seats. And if that happens, then of the LDP, there are about 10 members who will definitely lose their seats. And if LDP and Ishin are going to vote for this, they need to have a good cohesion, because even LDP and Ishin together don't make 50%. So they still can't pass the law. So they need other members. They need another 3 if everybody voted for it. But of the LDP, you've got 10 members who are not going to be members. They know that. They're on the proportional representation. If it's reduced, they're going to be out of, they're not going to vote for it. So I don't know, the LDP is in a hard place to convince the members who are going to lose to stick to the plan and vote with the party. I don't know if they can do that. And I think people are acknowledging that too. So the smaller parties are expected to lose between 25 and 66%. Ishin and the Democratic Party for the People, Mr. Tamaki's party, they'll lose 15%. The Liberal Democratic Party and the Constitutional Democratic Party, they'll lose maybe 10%. So the pain is spread out, but it's the smaller parties who lose the most. And this is brilliant. If it happens and the LDP only loses 10%, the Constitutional Democratic Party loses 10%, Ishin loses maybe 15%, then that redistribution puts the LDP back on top. They might not even need Ishin as a consequence of that reseating. So everything needs to happen before the 17th of this month. So there's a lot of politicking that's going on. But I think most analysts say it can't happen. And so if it doesn't happen, now what? What does Ishin do if LDP doesn't is not able to pony up and show its enthusiasm for doing that? So I think the lack of enthusiasm will be pretty evident when they know what the outcome is going to be. They're just not going to be able to do it. And there's more things to be talking about. There's political reform, there's the subsidy, there's a lot of other things in addition to a very difficult reduction of diet seats. So the idea of having a snap election comes up before the end of the year. So with the prime minister's popularity very high, it's higher than it's been for the last 4 prime ministers. It is exceedingly high. And we're only 4 weeks into it. And the performance that she's had over the last 4 weeks really bodes well for her. So if she wanted to call a snap election, Mr. Ishiba did that. He didn't have the wind in his sails when he became prime minister, but still he called for an election. She's got wind in her sails. And of course, she's saying publicly she's not going to call for an election, but it is in the cards. If Ishin is going to be angry because she didn't fulfill her 10 promises or 5 of the 10 promises within a very constricted period of time, it's something that she would consider. So we're going to keep our eyes on that. Let me see, with political transparency, slush funds, guardrails, and the diet resize, the court is still out. There's been no major breakthroughs this last week. Moving into this next week, maybe by this time next week, I can report to you differently, but it all depends on a huge mix of other issues, not just what we've been talking about, but also the ugly head of scandals. So there are 4 that we talked about last week. I'd like to just mention them to you now, not to hammer them too much or give them too much validity, but they are in the press. They could be damaging to the prime minister. And these are cabinet seats. These are positions within the cabinet. So it could, if they go really hard, and if there is some flame where there's the smoke, it could diminish the prime minister's ability to move the country forward. So let's see about each of those individually. Foreign Minister Hayashi Yoshimasa has been accused of underreporting funds. This has been going on for a while, but now that he's foreign minister, it's really coming up. He has local support groups. When he gives a speech, they have a lunch, a benkyokai. I've joined many of those, and they contribute money by paying for the lunch or paying for the cocktails for the briefing that they get when it's in the evening. And at this sensitive moment to be criticized for that, he is the point man while Japan-China tensions are spiking. So having focus on him, it's just really not very helpful. So it's smoldering now. It might just disappear, but it's not the only one. Economic Revitalization Minister Minoru Kiuchi also has a bit of a problem. Somewhat similar to the foreign ministers. It's an opaque political organization payments that he's been receiving. And this matters because Economic Revitalization Minister, he's overseeing the $17 trillion stimulus rollout that they're under discussion right now with. So for him to be pocketing money and then distributing the stimulus money, it looks like it's just LDP politics once again. So it's got to be nipped in the bud, and so that Japanese politics looks like clean politics. It's not the old LDP stuffing money into their pockets and not reporting it, not paying the taxes, and the people feeling the enormous amount of distrust, which still exists, which is why she's putting a lot of emphasis on that, which also is why these potential scandals are so potentially damaging to her. The scandal radar is not limited to just the LDP. Also, Ishin has two leaders. It's got the governor of Osaka Prefecture, and it's got Mr. Fujita, who is a lower house member. They're both members. The governor of Osaka is not a diet member, and Ishin wants to be a national organization. It's regionally located in Kansai mostly. It wants to spread out, but that's why they have two leaders. They're the only party that has, a leader and a co-leader, and they're the only party that has a governor as a leader. That's really remarkable. So the governor can't become prime minister because he's not a diet member. Although I guess they could they could vote for an outsider to become prime minister, but he would have to become a diet man as a first step. But since he can't become a candidate for president, then Mr. Fujita can be. Anyway, he is also embroiled in a little bit of a scandal himself. This has been going on for about 5 years. He's very prominent within Ishin, and he's managing a lot of the printing that is done by the party. And over the last 5 years, he's been spending about 21 million yen for printing fees paid to a company that is run by his public secretary. So his public secretary gets paid by the state. He receives a salary. He reports to the diet member. He's one of the team. It's like when I was working with Dr. Nakayama, you're one of the team. That's where you go to work every day. But he's also running this printing company that has been generating 21 million yen worth of revenue. And they're saying it's just a way to bypass the reporting and to bring it back to the diet member. The kind of bad thing about this is when the story broke, Mr. Fujita named by name the reporter who called him out on that. And I think it was a journalist on Akahata, which is the newspaper for the Japan Communist Party. They're the newspaper that also broke the Abe scandal with the money in the pockets. Akahata broke that. Akahata, the sales of Akahata are the revenue source for the Japan Communist Party. And so that's why they want corporate donations out, because they don't rely on them. Some of the minor political parties don't rely on campaign contributions by companies because they're just not big enough, but the LDP does. The LDP represents big business. So for them, having corporate donations, I mean, that's their lifeblood, and everybody knows that. Everybody hates that. So they're trying to diminish that. So this clean politics image of Ishin is potentially at risk. How this one goes forward, this is awkward for the prime minister, because she's in this loose coalition, and if this loose coalition member is criticized, or he's in dirty money and he's using these schemes to kind of redirect money back, and it does look pretty bad. I mean, to have his public secretary running this printing company, it does look a little bit bad. It's not LDP, it's Ishin, but the Ishin LDP combination is really delicate at this stage. And then finally, you might remember the candidate who was, let's crush NHK. We hate NHK. Mr. Tachibana was a former NHK employee. He ran for office, and under the banner of "Let's crush NHK. You don't have to pay your fees. These guys that are knocking on your door, they're terrorists, and we don't have to pay that. And NHK doesn't represent the voice of the Japanese government," and everything about him. So a lot of people like that. A lot of people don't like being interrupted at dinner time and NHK coming by and insisting on your payment. So He was arrested this last week. He's a sitting member of the parliament. He's had a colorful stint as a congressman. He was criticized for defamation for a member in Hyogo Assembly who was he was a person of interest, and Tachibana said that he was under investigation by the police, even though the police said he's not under investigation. We're not mentioning who we're talking to, but this particular member of the Hyogo Prefecture Assembly we're not investigating him. But Tachibana kept going on and on about that and talking about it on the web, and eventually this particular individual killed himself because of the harassment, because of the defamation that he was receiving, and just a persistent campaign of harassment, conspiracy content, and intimidation politics, which is kind of the trademark of Mr. Tachibana. So they arrested him just this last week, and it's interesting because arresting a member of the parliament is a big deal. You don't want to do that. So this is pretty serious for Tachibana. I imagine he will be released, and there will be a lawsuit. But it is something of note. He was a gadfly and a thorn in the side of the establishment. So they've come in and nailed him for defamation. But it is true that as a consequence of his campaign, somebody killed themselves. So that's a pretty serious thing. The yen closed out, Maya, at 154.04 this last week. On Friday, it closed out. 154, I mean, that's almost the tipping point. And typically, the Bank of Japan moves in intervention even before it gets to 154. It has been to 154 before, and the Bank of Japan jumped in and they purchased Japanese yen to increase the value. We're kind of getting there, and if it goes to 155, I'm sure there will be a move by the Bank of Japan, but that irritates everybody else. It irritates their trading partners. It irritates the United States. The key drivers is that the interest rate differential between the United States and Japan is too big. The United States is complaining that you should be more in line with the international standard. The value of your yen is too low. You need to prop it up. You need to get more value out of the yen without going in and purchasing it from government money. So the Bank of Japan has been slow on responding to that. I don't think they have tweaked the interest rate for almost a year. And now they're considering a $17 trillion stimulus, and that's going to further diminish the value of the yen. So you've got that going. And then there's still the volatility of the Trump tariffs that are still kind of bringing the value of the yen down. So the winners on this particular 154 value, 155 yen to the dollar are the big companies, Toyota, Hitachi, Mitsubishi, the exporters. And the losers are consumers, small and medium enterprises, grocery stores, logistics, because most of that is demonstrated in imports, and the imports are always going to be paid from Japanese yen converted into dollars, and so they lose out on that. And also because the inflation for food, they announce it's around 3%, but I think it's more closer to 4 or 5%. And utilities are very volatile, the utility rates and the gasoline payments. So there's just a lot of pressure that's continuing to mount on small and medium enterprises. So the Bank of Japan intervention outlook, maybe if it hits 155, and that could be at any time. So on a daily rate, it does bump up and down. It didn't hit 155 throughout this last week, but it might in the coming weeks. The Bank of Japan could intervene unilaterally if it exceeds a certain trigger point. We don't know what it is, but we suspect it's around 155. So they don't want to contradict the prime minister's expansion message, but it is something of great national importance. And the debt to GDP, we all know this. It's 250 times the jet to GDP ratio. So every time they spend money that's not being compensated by some sort of a revenue, they get into trouble. And so the stimulus package, the largest, in many prime ministerships, where's that money going to come from, and how are you going to pay for it? And I am fiscally responsible. My name is Sanae Takaichi, and I am fiscally responsible, and my administration will be fiscally responsible. But when you see this, it goes against that, because you can't just create money and pay for these things, especially if there's going to be an election and LDP and Ishin are not getting together. That's going to happen very quickly within this year, potentially. So bringing fuel costs lower for households, relief for trucking and agriculture, for local government subsidies to extend those, and potentially tax-free food for temporary period. It's still under debate, but all of that's going to happen in a very narrow time frame. We're going to be able to talk about it in real time this time next week too. One of the other things that has come up is, I'm sure you've heard this, China has announced maybe 2 days ago, don't travel to Japan. My citizens of China, don't travel to Japan. Japan is unsafe for you to travel to. So it's not a ban, but it is them pronouncing Japan is not a country we advise you to travel to. So pre-COVID, the Chinese visitors, Chinese tourists that were coming in were sometimes eclipsing 50%. After COVID, the numbers started to come up. I think it's probably around 35 or 40% now. So it's a big contingent. Not everybody will listen, but there is expected to be a diminution in the number of Chinese visitors. But I think, the words from the prime minister on tapping down on foreigners, on over tourism, this kind of scare of policies against long-term residents or the business visa. A lot of these issues are coming out. So we expect a policy paper to come out in January, but there's a lot going on here, and much of it implicates Chinese residents. So I think her visiting and meeting with the Taiwanese APEC delegate when she was there in South Korea also highlighted that. But her comment about if China moves aggressively on Taiwan, that's an existential threat for us. It triggers like joint security and support of like-minded countries and facilitating their objectives. That was really something that they couldn't stand for. There was a comment made by the Consul General in Osaka, which was very harsh against the prime minister, almost threatening. The ambassadors were called to meet with the foreign ministry in both countries. So the Chinese ambassador was called to Tokyo to get a dressing down, and similarly the Japanese ambassador in Beijing was also called to get a dressing down as well. So I don't know. The decline could cut as much as 0.2 or 0.3% of GDP just on the Chinese tourists if there was a whole hog ban for the Chinese visiting. So that's a very big deal. And already we can see hesitation of travel slowing up in the booking data. So it's something to look at. So we can see from this, just these last couple of days, that the prime minister's stance with regard to Taiwan is pro, and she's not afraid to say it, and she's not afraid to stand behind it. And we can remember many times on TV, why doesn't the prime minister just say it? Why is he so mealy-mouthed? Why does he kind of dodge the question? And that's not what's happening with the current prime minister. So a lot of people are standing up. They're taking note of that. They're clapping their hands. Japan can stand up to this bullying that China does, but you've got to admit that China is Japan's #1 trading partner. They're right next door. They do have a huge influence on trade, investment, geopolitics, and just everything. I mean, China is a huge player in the world, so you can't diminish them, and you don't want to anger them too much. But it looks like the prime minister is willing to kind of test that and more closely join the alliance of like-minded countries championed by the United States and be a little bit bolder. And that's why the Pacific Island Summit coming up is so important. Why the state visit from the Fijians was hosted by the Prime Minister just this last week. And so there's a gradual buildup going on there. So we can anticipate there's much more going on in the background. Also, this makes the current Prime Minister a real sweetheart of Washington, D.C. So raising Beijing's temperature is always something that the United States would like to use. We talked about regional security. We talked about the critical points in the north, in the south, in the west. There are things going on. There are 4 islands in the northern territories. We talked about that. Etufuro, Kunashiri, Shikotan, and the Hamuba islets in the north. Those are the islands that the Soviet Union took over at the end of the war. Japan was already down. They dropped the atomic bombs. Surrender was just days away, and then the Soviet Union invaded. It was going to invade in Hokkaido as well, but they only got the 4 islands. And so they're called the Northern Territories. Japan hasn't relinquished their claim on them. And in fact, there is no peace treaty between Japan and the Soviet Union, or Russia nowadays, because of the occupation of those 4 islands. And the Russians are now ratcheting down on their exclusionary control of those islands. And particularly with Shikotan and Etufuro, there is a blanket rejection of safe passage. So if you want to fish there, if you want to have your ship or your tanker sail through there, they're not allowing you to do that. And so that enhances costs, and it also is a violation of some of the fishing agreements that they've already had between fishermen in Hokkaido and some of the families that had to leave those islands because the Soviets had come in and moved to Hokkaido. So there are a lot of displaced families there as well. So this is a real flashpoint. The second flashpoint is the Senkaku Islands, which is claimed by Japan, China, and Taiwan. All 3 of the countries claim that. Nobody lives on it maybe in respect of the others who are debating the territorial issues. So nobody lives on it. There's no permanent grounding there, but the Chinese have been invading the exclusive zone almost every day and multiple times throughout the day to kind of set a new standard. We can go there as much as we want, and it tests the response time of the Japanese Coast Guard and the Americans for doing flybys and trying to prevent the Chinese from monitoring it. But I think what the Chinese are trying to do, it hasn't been much of an escalation, but they're trying to just create a new normal. This is part of our territory too, and although you might claim it, we're visiting it every day, and so keep your nose out of it. So I think there's no major escalation there, but there's a sustained pressure that you can see that they're beginning to exercise. The third one is the Second Thomas Shoal. This is really important. This is in the Philippines, also a kind of disputed territory. This one is not an island like the Senkakus. This is a shoal. At high water, it's underwater. At high tide, it's underwater. At low tide, it's above ground. And what the Philippines did is they crashed a huge ship onto the shoals, and they've permanently occupied the ship. So they're saying that this extends, our territorial rights at least to the Second Thomas Shoals, and they need to supply this crashed ship with soldiers and with people living on it to establish their claim that it belongs to the Philippines. So the Chinese frequently come by, they water cannon it, they ram boats that are trying to supply it, they prevent the supply of the tanker that's there, and it's kind of a gray zone coercion that the Chinese are practicing. It is a little bit of a gray zone. I mean, it isn't, it's not an island, it's a shoal, and we kind of create an island by crashing a boat on it. But that is the claim there, and Chinese are not having any part of it, and they don't agree to it. So the other kind of issues that potentially flare up right now are North Korea. North Korea has been quiet for the last 10 days. They were very active. They fired a bunch of missiles, supersonic missile tests, several, right after the prime minister, the day after the prime minister became prime minister, Sanae Takaichi became prime minister. The next day, before she went to Malaysia for the ASEAN meeting, they fired these rockets to make sure that, don't forget us. So they also condemn her stance, Takaichi's stance, as being very militaristic. You can see what she's doing. So they're kind of keeping the temperature up there. And there are just you've always got to keep an eye on what's going on in North Korea. As I reported earlier, she has mentioned that she would like to visit and she would like to have a face-to-face with Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, particularly about the kidnapped citizens that North Korea has taken. And there are many stories about that. It's not a fantasy. It's not a myth. There are a lot of people that were conked on the head and thrown into sacks and taken to North Korea, and she wants an accounting of that. It doesn't look like that's going to happen, but she has offered that as a meeting place. The other thing is that when President Trump was in South Korea, he did agree that South Korea could produce a nuclear-powered submarine. And that's a big deal because if you can produce one in your shipyards, that means that you have them at your own defense, but also you could begin to sell them to other countries that might like that. South Korea excels in shipbuilding. The prime minister has said Japan should excel even more at shipbuilding, and we would like to do. They already have, submarines, a submarine fleet that is homegrown. None of them are nuclear powered, but if they had a nuclear powered, it would be in violation of some of the promises that she's made, the three nuclear principles of not having or projecting or selling nuclear devices or holding nuclear weapons on Japanese soil. So we understand that security, those three security documents are under review, and I imagine under this prime minister, they will be revised. She is going to be a tough prime minister. She's going to be basically a military balanced prime minister. She's got Koizumi as her defense minister. She's trying to invest more money in defense capabilities, and I think the discussion of constitutional revision is just around the corner. Let me see, what else do we have? We've got the bear incidents. We talked about this last week. It is at a record level. So right now, I think the bears in Hokkaido, Akita, in Aomori, they should already be hibernating because it's already snowed in some of those places. But the bears are still out foraging, trying to get as much food as they can before they go into hibernation. The number of bear incidents has skyrocketed, and there are people who have been killed and attacked, and they're trying to get the self-defense forces involved and train them how to hunt and track and trap, maybe even kill these bears. But it is an issue that's come up with increased frequency over the last couple of weeks. It's also been the 70th anniversary of the creation of the LDP. So they had a big brouhaha. I think it was on Wednesday. During this whole time that the prime minister is undergoing her questioning, she also had to go to the LDP headquarters to make a speech and a pronouncement, 70 years and congratulations to us. And this is what we're going to do. And we have a new administration. And this is what we're going to achieve. And even though we have a minority government, this is how we're going to coalesce our forces and be the representatives of the entire nation of Japan, on and on and on. So that happened. That was, a way to kind of distance the party from the slush fund incident that broke maybe 2 years ago. It really collapsed the government. It collapsed the largest political faction in the LDP. The Seiwakai no longer exists. But I think she, as a keynote speaker, she wanted to rebuild. She said she wanted to rebuild public trust while expanding Japan's strategic capacity. So you can see these two themes in concert in the pronouncements of this prime minister. So I think she's doing a really good job. She's only been in position for 4 weeks. There's much more to come up. There are a lot of challenges. Keep your eye on her because I think she is going to be a very substantial prime minister. She needs to get through this 1 month, then it breaks for the new year. Then the new diet session, the 150 days diet session, starts in January. There may not be a snap election. Ishin may or may not stick with them and continue to vote on policies with them. But even if the LDP and Ishin are successful in reducing the number of diet seats, it doesn't come into effect until there is an election of the lower house. And we have 3.5 years to wait for that. So let's wait and see. But that's basically it for my briefing today. I'm sure there are some questions on things that I haven't touched upon. And probably very clever people are going to point out where I've made mistakes and I've made mispronouncements, but bring it on, because that's what this program is all about. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about something I do on a daily basis. If you have issues, please let Maya or I know. If you've got professional issues, if you need help, by all means, give us a shout out. Maya?
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Timothy. And yes, of course, we're moving on now into the Q&A session. To everybody who posted your comments, questions, and thoughts here, yes, thank you so very much for doing so. I will also address two questions that came a little bit late last week, so that I just couldn't get them to Timothy.
That's right. You mentioned that.
Yes, I mentioned that, and apologies for that. Sometimes, because there is a lag,
Mhm.
between you post, the comment or question, and I can see it in the platform which we use for the live stream. Please forgive me. But anyway, we'll start with those two questions. So the first one comes from Mario and Mario Spitzer. So the question is about, is there any justification? New one for foreigners coming to Japan.
I'm sorry. Is there any what justification?
No, jury. Okay, sorry for the word. I think, it's basically a new legislation about foreigners or for foreigners coming to Japan. So,
No,
justification is the word that Mario used.
adjudication maybe. No, I think what the prime minister, and she's named a minister who is tasked with really ratcheting down. We don't want any illegal foreigners, but they've never wanted illegal foreigners. And it's, as anybody knows here, even the people who are here legitimately, or they marry a Japanese and they come in, or they're traveling and they want to set up a company and they bring some money and they get a visa. It's difficult. It's really difficult to get here, and there are only a couple of ports of entry that you can come in. And as Carlos Ghosn showed everybody, unless you have a piano case or a cello case, you're not going to get out of this country. You can't come in, you can't get out. The submarines can't whisk you out, except for the North Koreans who conk you on the head and kidnap you. But it's an island country and it wants to stay that way. And there is a bit of a sense, I think, I don't know if I can put my finger on it, of a focus on the foreigners. But the foreigners are just easy pickings. When the population is unrest and there are issues that are difficult to accommodate, foreigners are easy targets. But I think it's only a flavor. But I think, Japan is just looking at what's going on in England and France and the United States with the immigration and all over Europe and the damage and destruction that's done. And I think they're just trying to stick a stick in the mud and saying this is where we stand on this particular issue. But I don't think it's going to involve any new legislation, although there has been talk about increasing the amount of paid-in capital that people who have the business visa, they need to hire somebody. So that will include some new legislation, yes. But keeping out the illegal foreigners, I don't know if that requires, or maybe just defining what illegal means. That would require a tweaking of the law and a passage of the bill. So I hope that's responsive, Mario. Thanks for the question.
Yes, thank you. And another question that came last week from Diana Green was about the youth in Japan. What is being done to keep them interested in politics and also prepared for the future, possibly to participate more in politics?
The Utes, yes, the Utes of Japan.
Yes, yes.
So we've seen in the last election for the upper house, the youth were participating in larger numbers. So there is this groundswell of people who, they're smaller in numbers because the demographic bubble has kind of passed over. There are fewer younger people, and a lot of people they're retired or they're older than 65. That number is going to increase. Those people always vote conservative. It's the younger people who vote, who are a little bit more, they don't want to vote the way that their parents did. They're open to suggestion. Sanseito is, I don't want to vote for the LDP because they took the money and I think they're cheating. But Sanseito looks pretty good. I mean, they're kind of like LDP. Also, the Democratic Party for the People, it's kind of like the LDP. It's not like the socialists. It's not like the communists. And their leader is cool. He's very aggressive. He's handsome. He speaks with authority. And also, you can say the same thing with Sanseito. So, and also, both of these parties, Sanseito and the Democratic Party for the People, but I think most of the other parties too, are becoming much more savvy on social media. And it's the younger people who are not reliant on Bunshun or NHK or the Nikkei for their news. I mean, it's a global phenomenon, but the regular blue chip news agencies are not the ones that are being relied upon. It's social media where people go to their curated feed. The people that they believe in, the people they want to follow. That's where they're generating their news. And I think, being politically active is seen as being responsible, not cool, but being something that you should do as a citizen. So the voting age has dropped, the age of maturity has dropped. So there are more people that are engaged in that, and it could just be a sign of the times, but it could be a trend for the future as well.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. And now, so there are a few things that came when you were talking about the Asia Pacific and this region. So, okay, Keizawa, he wrote about Takeshima as well. So that is another potential point of, let's say, tension. It has been for quite a while. And also, we've got,
Hey, Zao has that world famous dog.
yes, with Hachi. Yes. Everybody loves Hachi. Yes. Okay. And then, well, Manabe-san says that the role of the Japanese Coast Guard will be even more important from, well, now into the future. Of course.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yes, very much so. All
So
right. Yes.
Manabe-san points out something really important. So the Japanese Coast Guard is they're very well regarded. I'm sailing all the time. I'm always running into the Coast Guard. Their presence is very obvious. They have good ships, good cutters. They're not armed. They have water cannons on them, but they're of such high priority that that the Philippine government is always requesting, can you give us some of your decommissioned Coast Guard ships? And the Japanese are doing that. They're rotating them out, not brand new ones. I don't think they've donated brand new ones to the Philippines, but the Japanese Coast Guard, it's about as close as you can get to being in the military without, having that kind of military training. But I think that, like Manabe-san kind of hints at, that is likely to change. That's what the Chinese did. The Chinese Coast Guard is everywhere in the South Pacific, but now they're putting, arms on them. It's not just water cannons, but they also have guns on them as well. So it doesn't look like the Coast Guard. It looks more like the Navy. So yes, there's a lot of growth and opportunity. And the Japanese have for a long time, the Navy, the Coast Guard has been the pinnacle of military service. It's not the Air Force or the Army, it's the Navy. They've always been very proud of their naval heritage.
Okay, so moving on then to the questions that came this morning, and one after the other, once again in chronological order. So the Chinese consul general in Osaka made a despicable statement against the Japanese prime minister. Ishin no Kai party has demanded that the CG be declared as person, or the consul general be declared as persona non grata and
Yep,
expelled from Japan.
yep.
Even the US ambassador weighed in and saying it was not the first time that the consul general had made undiplomatic statements. By not expelling him so far, is it showing that Japan is weak, or does it indicate that Japan goes the extra mile to be good neighborly, or is it something in between? This question is from Byron.
Yeah. So look at what I do, not at what I say. You know, if the Japanese are not going to expel him, I mean, that would trigger something else. I mean, already they're fighting the tourists, right? If China really doubles down and tells its citizens don't travel to China, don't travel to Japan, it's not a safe place. They're going to steal your organs. They're going to rob your money. They're going to treat you as you know, distasteful people. Don't go there. Yeah, it could have a serious impact. Maya, do you know what the current number of Chinese visitors is in the entire mix? I know we're probably at about 4 million visitors a month, but I'm not sure what the Chinese mix. It was eclipsing
Sorry,
fifty
no,
percent.
I haven't, yes, but it is really the bigger part of the visitors. It comes from China, then Taiwan, and then South Korea, and well, of course, Western visitors follow. But yeah, China is still the biggest market for Japan as a travel destination.
So I think the reluctance to move aggressively on the Council General. Um, yeah, I think China is going to read it as weakness, and you're afraid of us, and so you're not going to try and escalate. But doing something like that would be an escalation. If it were me, I would have expelled him. You know, you can't as a diplomat, you're not supposed to be that contentious and acerbic in your pronouncements, particularly at this particular point in time, and particularly with this new prime minister. You know, you're kind of looking for a fight if you're going to be making statements like that. And although the Council General has been criticized for making statements like that in the past, nothing goes on without approval and authorization from the headquarters. So yeah, it's that's how diplomacy is done. It's done through action and counteraction and moves like this. So I think if the Japanese leave the Council General there, it's going to continue to be a thorn.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. I can see now in Clubhouse, Hiroko-san, she shared in April, there were 765 and 100, no, 765,100 tourists from China in April this year. So this is a
Okay.
huge number, yes, per month. All right. So thank you very much for this, Hiroku-san, and to everybody who is in Clubhouse. I am sorry there was a glitch there, so we were sent out of the room, and I had to reopen it again. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for that. And okay, moving on to the next question. Here we go. Just give me a second. I need to. Oh, yes. Okay, China has issued an advisory. You just mentioned this for Chinese tourists to not visit Japan. While some Chinese may indeed listen to the advisory, the Chinese government has not blocked departures to
Yeah.
Japan, which they could as an authoritarian nation. Is it merely posturing by China in an attempt to match uh, Prime Minister Takaichi's alleged rhetoric? Yeah,
Oh,
I
sure.
think that.
Obviously, I mean that's the
Yes.
way diplomacy is played.
Right. Okay. And then the next one, Finance Minister Ms. Katayama indicated that Japan cannot default on its debt obligation despite its high debt to GDP ratio because the debt is in yen denominated. Is yen denominated. Will that silence the finance ministry's ultra hard line position with respect to lowering gasoline tax and raising the minimum taxable limit on income?
I'm not sure if I caught where's the question in that?
Okay, so the question is the last part. Will this basically that Japan cannot default on its debt obligations? This is something that the
Okay.
minister has stated. Will it silence the finance ministry's hardline position with respect to lowering gasoline tax and raising the minimum taxable limit on income?
Okay. So first of all, if it was going to create a default now, because the gasoline tax is going to add another what 2 or 3 trillion to the budget, and we don't know where that money's coming from. If that was going to make the Japanese government default on their debt, that would have happened 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, it wasn't a 250 to 1 ratio, right? Income to debt. You
Right,
know, right now it is. It's 251, 1 or 2 to 1 debt ratio, GDP to debt. So it's not going to collapse the country. It hasn't collapsed the country. They still spend money that they don't have. The people who are going to be paying it are children and grandchildren and great grandchildren. They're just going to carry this debt and hope and pray that there's another industry, AI perhaps, or military hardware that is going to generate revenue above and beyond the amount of input that you have in generating that. And then they'll be able to pay that down. But right now, she's between a rock and a hard place. Although she's a fiscal conservative, anywhere she looks, it's just like, what am I going to do? And now I've got the finance minister saying I can't spend that money, but I've got to create a stimulus package. I've already told President Trump that I'm going to collapse from 5 years to 4 years our attainment of 2% GDP growth for defense spending, and that money has to come. I tell you what we're going to do, and this is what the plan is. We're going to sell more government bonds. That's debt, right? So that plan is under discussion, and I think it's unavoidable because the money has to come from somewhere. And as long as Japan is paying off those debts for the bondholders when they become due, so when they sell government bonds, they're usually a 10-year payout, could be 20 years. But if you buy the 10-year bonds, then you get a guaranteed return on that in 10 years. So the Japanese government can hold that. And they haven't defaulted yet. So, and there are other bonds too that are shorter than 10 years, but that's usually the benchmark. But I think the only way that they can do it is by issuing more government bonds, which of course diminishes the value of the yen. And it's just not good fiscal policy. But if you put yourself in the position of Miss Takaichi, you're between a rock and a hard place. Something's got to give. And if you don't do it well and kind of convince people to hold their nose while they go through this period, maybe you can survive until this time next year. But you've got to give people a vision for the future, and you've got to kind of pay down so that they're not paying out the nose for gas and food and the inflation. And even though the wages are increasing, they can't buy anything more, and people become depressed. And then there are more not bank foreclosures, companies that are going under bankruptcy. So it's a very delicate balance.
right. Thank you for that. And also moving on to other questions. So once again, domestic politics and economy. So Peter Pan, thank you very much for being with us again. So writes, in spite of Minister Koizumi measures in the previous government, the price of rice is still
Yes.
high. What prevents the price to go lower?
Um, Yeah, I'm not sure. I think the only answer I can give without much deeper insight is just the cost of production and the number. It's also the distribution. So distribution of rice, it's generally held by the Japan. What is JA? Japan Agricultural Association,
Agriculture,
right?
yes, yes.
So the farmers produce rice, and JA gives them loans, lets them buy tractors and fertilizers, and then they have a claim on purchasing rice at a set price once you finish producing it. So we're going to support you throughout the year, and you need some new tractors, you need some new seeds, you need something else. We're going to help you support that, and then you pay us when when the money comes in. But we also purchase your rice to help you pay that down. And brokers have come in and said, we understand that you're receiving this amount of money from JA to pay down your debt, but also to make a little bit of a profit. And the profit margins are very small for farmers. Farmers are not making a lot of money on this. And the brokers come in and they say, we're going to pay you more for the rice. So instead of selling it to them, sell it to us. We'll give you money for that. You pay that to JA to diminish your debt. So the brokers are coming in and they're purchasing the rice in huge stockpiles. The other thing that keeps the price high is that Japan wants to be self-sufficient in rice. It's 34% self-sufficient in caloric intake. So it can't even produce enough calories for its nation as it stands right now. It has to import it. So as it imports it, it pays yen for that. Those are denominated in dollars, and so that cost is high. But with regard to rice, there's an artificial restriction on bringing in imported rice. The Americans want the Japanese to buy rice. The Thai want to sell more rice to Japan, but there's artificial restrictions there to keep the price high so that the farmers can generate a profit, and JA can stay in business. So it's rather complicated, but I think I don't sense that that's a very good response to a really good question. But yes, it is true. After Koizumi, and that wasn't because of Koizumi, um, but he was the minister of agriculture in the last administration. Now he's minister of defense. They have a new minister of agriculture, and the price of rice has continued to go up. We are now selling rice that is going onto the market. So they've just had their harvest, so you can buy new rice now. That's the freshest. That's the tastiest. It's the most expensive, and then the rest they put in the warehouse, and that warehouse is supposed to take them until the next growing season produces. So probably around midsummer of next year. And the reason why we had this spike last year is because they didn't stockpile enough rice. So they were selling rice that was 4 years old, and then 3 years old, and then 2 years old. And they sold out most of that stuff. And as a consequence, with lack of, with scarcity, then the prices go up. So it's a complicated issue.
Yes, it's interesting because the current Minister of Agriculture is one of the youngest ministers Japan has had so far, right? And also, he's a
But
former
a clever
bureaucrat.
cookie. He is a clever guy.
Very clever, yes, but he's also a former bureaucrat, right?
That's
He
right.
worked for one of the ministries there. And it was interesting because to everybody who might find this informative, I hope you will, he actually has a different approach to this issue because Koizumi, minister, when he was Minister of Agriculture, he believed that he will be able, as a minister, and his ministry, of course, they will be able to control the price by intervening in the market. And the current minister, who is actually, a former bureaucrat, he says that, the market has to decide the price or to determine the price. So, which is a very different approach. Actually, this is the opposite approach to Koizumi's, right? And of course, it's interesting. I believe that both approaches have their, let's say, advantages and disadvantages, but I don't know whether we'll see the price of rice go down
Yeah.
with either approach, because with Koizumi's approach, it didn't go down. And now, if it is left to the market to decide that basically, Timothy, you said that brokers are going directly to the rice producers, and so they're shortcutting, right, the
Right.
supply chain. So I don't think that we're going to see the price of rice lower, but who knows? A miracle might happen, right?
Well, it is the staple. It is the staple of the
Yeah.
country. At every meal, the Japanese will eat rice. So without rice, you're not going to have a meal. And when Japanese travel abroad, they can last a day or two. They can eat hamburgers. They can have beef and steak, and they can eat foie gras. But after a day and a half, 2 days, they really need to get back to rice. I think the Japanese the digestive tract requires the rice. I mean, that's what they've been fed on, and I think
Well,
it's
that's the legacy food.
yeah,
The legacy staple food. Yes, indeed. And not only in Japan, like everywhere else in Southeast Asia, East Asia as well.
yeah.
So, yes,
Well,
right.
it's like the Indians. When the Indians travel, they can go a day or two, maybe not even that long, but they need to have some Indian food. You
Mhm.
know, it's difficult for them to travel outside the country after they've been eating Indian food, which is delicious. It's nutritious. It's natural. It's got lots of spices. It's very tasty. But yeah, they can't. I think it's just. I mean, everybody's like that, I guess.
We all do. Yes,
Yeah,
we go back to our comfort food
yeah.
after a couple of days, wherever we are in the world. Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. And also, we've got a question from Agnieszka Pavnik. I believe this is the pronunciation, maybe coming from Central Europe. And then she says, "Thank you for this insightful talk. What are your thoughts on whether or not the demands made by Ishin to create this coalition will be met? What if they are not met? Can you
Yeah,
please elaborate?"
yeah. I think we know now. We're 4 weeks into it, but I think we know it's not going to work. I don't think the first and foremost they want to reduce the number of seats by 10%. That's 50 seats in the lower house. That's a big deal, and to do that within a 70-day time period, it's really aggressive. But she agreed to it. She would have agreed to anything. Had Ishin, I'm sure they said, well, how about this? And she said, okay, I'll do that. And then they go, oh yeah, how about this? Okay, we can do that too. And then somebody else says something. Yeah, how about this one too? So there's a list of 10. Some of
Mhm.
them must be achieved in this diet session, which is very aggressive. Some of them are, for example, we want you to make Osaka as the secondary capital. Okay, I just said it. There, we did it. Okay, what's the next issue? Some of them are a little bit more difficult, and they require, you know, um, indications that it is set in stone. So, making Osaka the secondary capital is going to require some adjustments and some movements to put you know, reality to the promise. You see what I do, not what I say, right? So to make that a reality. But with the election or the diminishment of 50 diet seats in the proportional representation, I think they've admitted this last week that it's not going to happen. So the
Right.
question
And
is,
there is,
so what happens? What is
right.
Ishin going to do? So that's why this scandal with the co-leader of Ishin is so important. Did his private secretary actually reroute this money, 21 million over a 5-year period, 21 million yen, and route that back to the diet man? And if that's the case, then the LDP could arguably say, we have this agreement with you that we're going to join forces, but you're criticizing us for not having the 50 seats. But your guy, Mr. Fujita, he was pocketing some money. I don't know if we want to be in a. So it kind of flips things around, and it enhances the opportunity for the prime minister to say, "Forget it. I'm going to have a snap election because I can't work with you guys. You're holding the sword of Damocles over my head. I want the LDP to be in charge. I'm going to hold an election. And there have been reports. There's been an analysis that's been done just this last week where it reports that if there is a snap election, the LDP is going to win massively. And so this is attractive to the LDP. They say, if we win massively because the prime minister is popular and some of the pronouncements and this loose coalition with Ishin, it just doesn't feel right. Let's give the LDP candidates more of a say. And then they have a snap election and the LDP comes back. They don't need the Ishin. They don't need the Constitutional Democratic Party. They don't need these guys because they're back on top. They have 51% in the lower house once again, and then they're back with a vengeance. That's the dream. So this report just came out this last week. There was a distribution of seats that will be lost by the LDP, by the Constitutional Democratic, by all of these parties, smart people who know what the numbers are and they know how to count and what the politics means, with Komeito not supporting some of these candidates and supporting somebody else, and with the LDP really barreling down on some of these districts where they left it alone because Komeito was their coalition partner, so we're not going to run a candidate. That goes out the window. Ishin and Komeito they dislike each other so much. There's no Komeito in Kansai of any numbers that are meaningful. The Ishin has kicked them all out. They've kicked out most of the LDP members as well. So Ishin is likely to lose pretty big too, maybe 20% of their members. So although everybody loses, the LDP loses the least, and then maybe comes back out on top after the election. So that's a very attractive apple. A great question, and I hope that explanation sheds a little bit of light on the delicacy of the prime minister. Do I call for a national election? Do I go forward? Do I stimulate the economy with this huge $21 trillion stimulus budget so that although I'm violating my promise to be fiscally responsible, people like me a lot more, but I'm kicking the debt to ratio, the debt to revenue ratio down the field for some other later administration to deal with, but survival first. So it's expedient. So
Right.
we're going to see a lot in the next 30 days. We're going to see a lot.
We're going to see a lot, and it's as well, Patricia. Oh, that's Agnieszka again. She says that this situation is fascinating, and it's also true. I realized something this past week that, well, there is a lot of questioning towards Prime Minister Takaichi about the 10% reduction of seats. She always, let's say, beats around the bush. She doesn't respond to the questions directly, and so everybody around me is wondering, okay, so what's the deal there? And yes, I think that, Timothy, you have talked about this, but the general public does not understand what and why is happening there. So thank you very much for keeping us updated.
The interesting thing, now that you mention it, Maya, in the questioning, when she is in the hot seat and the various members of the political parties have an opportunity to quiz her, they went very, very soft on quizzing her about the 50. So they also they're a little bit reluctant to kind of probe too much on the issue because they don't want to give it life. And so they give her softball questions, rather oblique. Sometimes they don't touch it at all. There are other issues that are more important to them, and it's not the reduction of 50 members of the lower house. It's very curious. But that means, where there's curiosity, where there's suspicion, there's generally a deeper story there. Maybe we can get into it a little bit more next week as this thing becomes a little bit fleshed out. But the questions and the curiosity is well placed.
Yes, thank you very much for this. And then, Timothy, I know that you have been waiting for this moment for quite a while. So, yes, we have gone through the questions, the comments, the thoughts of everybody who decided to share them with us. And if I have missed something, we'll address it next week on Sunday at 8:20. We'll be here once again. Timothy, thank you very much for today. And to everybody who stayed with us, we wish you a very pleasant weekend. This is, well, really a nice day. Here in Tokyo, I hope that it is a beautiful day wherever you are. And yes, have a bright new week as well.
Thank you very much, Maya. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you. See you next week.
See you next week.